Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about some of the books that I have in my bilingual library. I get a lot of questions about what kinds of books to choose for young children. That'll help them develop their language skills. So I'll show you the kinds of books that I have in my home, the kinds that I read with my bilingual children. Right now they are 4.5 and 6.5 years old. And hopefully this will be helpful to you to help you kind of decide what kinds of books to choose for your children. So first I want to kind of walk you through the types of books that I have, the different kinds of books, and then later I'll tell you about my favorite authors and publishers. So the first kinds of books, the very first kinds of books that we get for kids are picture books. These are basically books with pictures. Now, if you have a toddler or a baby, these are some of the best kinds of books to start with. You can get them, you can get cardboard books like these over here. This one's in Russian. But these kind are a little bit more sturdy, and your child can kind of turn the pages and look at them by themselves. So these are good for very, very young children when you're just starting, when their language skills are in the very, very early stages of development. So by pointing to the pictures and saying the word over and over again, your child learns all these different words. And if you're raising bilingual children, it's important to have these kinds of picture books in both languages. It's very important. And it's important that you spend time reading them in both languages. If depending on which kind of strategy you use at home to create that bilingual atmosphere, you can have different ways of reading these books. Either different parents can read books in different languages, or you can read different languages at different times throughout the day or in different places. Whatever your strategy, be sure that your kids get exposed to these kinds of books in both languages. And by the way, if you want to see my videos about the different types of bilingual environments and different ways in which you can create a bilingual environment at home, I'll link that video down below and you can watch it. So as your child gets older, the types of picture books they will need will also change. For example, when they get older, you can look into getting something like this. Where basically we have one picture in the middle and then lots of kind of related pictures around, and you can start very interesting conversations with your child about this subject. As they get older and older, they will like different kinds of picture books. For example, this one here that I have it in 2 languages. It's in English and Spanish. My 4.5-year-old absolutely loves this book. There are many, many different kinds of words. This is basically just a picture dictionary, and we read the different words and different examples. They have sentences with examples, and yeah, older kids. This might not do so well for a toddler, but it will be great for like a preschooler. And then, of course, we have Richard Scarry's amazing, awesome books. Kids absolutely love the world of Richard Scarry, and because there's just so much detail in this. These kinds of books, even my 6.5, almost 7-year-old loves Richard Scarry's books like this. There's just so much on each page. The pictures are so interesting, and there are words and sentences, examples, little stories for all these different words, and these are great for helping your child learn lots and lots of new vocabulary. And the good thing about books like this is that it's not just giving lists and lists of words, but it's showing the words in context and giving example sentences and stories. This is a very, very important thing when choosing picture books for older kids. You see, you can kind of see the difference. When they're very young, we just basically show them books with just a picture and a word, and that's basically all they need. We can talk about the colors, maybe like, oh, this is a red and blue present, or red and blue scissors, or whatever. But as they get older, like 3, 4, we want to show them these words in context. We want to have kitchen words, all kinds of different words grouped together by the type of environment that we would see these words in. And what's also very important is that we have examples, sentences, and stories. Again, the context in which these different words are used is very, very important. And of course, the book needs to be interesting. For example, here I have a Richard Scarry book in Russian, because Richard Scarry's books have been translated into pretty much every language that I know of, just because they're so popular with kids and parents. Now, the next type of book I'm going to talk about are very, very simple storybooks. For example, in the beginning, if your child is young, 2, 3 years old, or maybe they're a bit older, but they don't speak their minority language very well. Maybe they've kind of learned one language better than the other, and that's their majority language, and they're struggling with their minority language, and you would like to help them develop their minority language. Now, these kinds of books are really good for that sort of situation, where we have very simple stories, lots of pictures, not too many words. Most of the story kind of happens in the present simple, is told in the present simple, so that the child understands everything that's happening. I can pick things up, I can lift things, I've got a trunk, all these kinds of little things. Lots and lots of these kinds of simple stories are important to have. We can take this vocabulary, these words that they've learned in the picture books, and actually put some more context around them. And we can show different situations in which the words can be used. And the kids start kind of getting used to the grammatical structures that we use, not only just talking about things on the picture, but talking about things that happened before and after, and so on and so forth. But if your child's language skills aren't very high, don't start with stories that are too complicated. Your child might get bored. So start with very, very simple ones. And as your child's language develops, move on to more complicated ones. Move on to stories that sort of have more in them, that have more of a plot, that have more complicated words, that have more interesting grammar. And you got to be careful to take this at the right pace, right? Be sure that your child understands. If they don't, explain. Stop and explain. Have patience whenever you read. And again, the older they get, you can start moving on to more complicated stories until we kind of get to sort of proper fairy tales. Now, if your child if their language skills are good enough to understand stories like this, absolutely do read as much as possible. Over here, I'll show you one of my daughter's favorite fairy tale books. These kinds of, I'm sure that you probably read stories like this to your child in your majority language, so be sure to read them in the minority language too. And the last type of book that I'm going to talk about is basically encyclopedias, science books, history books, all kinds of different books about the real world. For example, something like this. For example, here we have one about plants. Look at plants. Plants grow. How do they grow? They need water and light, and so on and so forth. Here I have an example about the body, or about pirates. Now, if your child attends a school or kindergarten or daycare in their majority language, there's a big chance that their minority language will kind of be limited to everyday things. That's something I noticed in my children, that their English skills were very limited to just our house and everything that was kind of going on inside or maybe outside, but they didn't have the language skills to kind of talk about the bigger world. And so I made a very big effort to get these kinds of books and read about all kinds of topics, not just fairy tale topics, but all kinds of topics about the real world. These are things that they'll usually learn about in school or in daycare, but they will probably not learn about them in the minority language. And since for us English is the minority language, I'm I've made a big effort to get these kinds of books and to spend time reading them and discussing kind of, the bigger world with them based on these books, and to help them really develop those language skills and make the language more natural and more native for them. So now I'll talk a little bit about my favorite authors and publishers for books. Going back to Richard Scarry's, my absolute favorite in all languages, and if you don't have any of these books yet, definitely get some of them. The things I love most about them is that kids love them. Kids absolutely love them. They love this kind of make-believe world of animals that he sort of created and the art. But also they're very relevant to certain situations. All the words are given in context, and there is really so much. As you can see, like every bit of the page is used up. I don't really like books where there's like just like one picture. For like, and lots of empty white space. I like as much of the space to be used up. I kind of feel that I'm getting more of my money's worth for that book because they are quite expensive. Another series of books that I really, really love are the Ladybird books because they have books from really basic picture books to simple fairy tales to really kind of more complicated, large fairy tales. Basically, they have readers and phonics readers and basically everything. Ladybird books are really good quality. They have good quality artwork. They're very well written. Only problem with them is that they are very expensive. So if you can get them secondhand or borrow them from someone, that would be awesome. As you can see, these I've lent these out so much. They are really kind of tattered up. Okay, and another author I love is Julia Donaldson. She writes really great books for kids as well as phonics readers, so you can use these both as storybooks when your kids are very young and then use them as readers when they're learning to read. And another one of my favorites, DK. They just have the most amazing books in the world. As you can see, I have English DK books and Russian DK books, and I could probably buy a whole bookstore of them if they weren't so expensive. Very, very pricey, but again, really worth it if you can get them secondhand or borrow them from someone or maybe from a library. I definitely recommend these two. And yeah, that's about it for today. I generally, another thing I do sometimes is I take my kids with me to a bookstore and actually just look and see what kinds of books they will pick up, which books will kind of get their interest. And I found that a lot of the books that they've kind of chosen for themselves, they really like to read too at home. So that's, if your kids are older, like 4, 5, 6 years old, you can do something like that too. Okay, I hope that was interesting for you and that you're able to gain something from that. And if you would like to share some of your favorite books, please do so in the comments. I'd really love to see that. If you have any more questions, go ahead, ask away, and yeah, see you next time. Goodbye.